So good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I'm James Spadola, City Council at Large of Wilmington. Very happy to be with everybody. Very thankful to Dr. Dorrell Green for taking the time to join us. I got a couple housekeeping notes before we get going. One, as I was just saying to Dr. Green, I am moderating and also trying to work the Zoom, and occasionally one of those will have to give. So if you see me staring awkwardly at the screen for a minute, please excuse me. I'm probably dealing with something on the Zoom end. Also, when I spoke with Dr. Green about doing this referendum, about doing this conversation about it, he did ask if we could put it off till January because the county is still producing some information about how reassessment will affect things. And I told him my wife is due early February, late January, and it might not happen if that's the case. And Dr. Green still agreed to do it, even with that, without all the information he wants. So I do appreciate that. So with that, I do want to acknowledge my father-in-law who just joined, speaking of my wife giving birth. And we do have 2 school board members who should be joining us soon too. But with that, Dr. Green, I would love to get going with just, if you could just introduce yourself, what you were doing up until you became the Red Clay superintendent, your background in education in general.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Councilman Spadola, for this opportunity. Thank you to the members of the community for joining us for this important conversation, which will be an ongoing conversation as we look to go out to referendum on February 28th. Just a bit about my background. I joined the Red Clay Consolidated School District here in March of 2019. So March of 2024 will be my 5th anniversary, or a year into my tenure here at Red Clay. I think all of our lives changed as we had to confront a pandemic. So much of my tenure here in Red Clay, 3.5 years, we're focused primarily on dealing with COVID and all the implications that COVID had on our students, families, and community at large. Prior to that, I ran an office for the Delaware Department of Education, the Office of Innovation and Improvement, for about 18 months, going on 2 years. Felt that I was too far removed from children and families, which is the work that I'm passionate about. And so I put my name in the hat to become the next superintendent for Red Clay. I spent from 2008 to 2009 in the Brandywine School District, where I was the former principal of Harlan Elementary. I ran Elementary Division, Director of Elementary Ed and Federal Programs for Brandywine School District, and I served as an assistant superintendent for 5 years, overseeing school operations, everything from transportation, school nutrition, safety and security, school nursing, social workers, child nutrition. Again, if I didn't mention that, all the things that kept the district operating and flowing smoothly. And then I started my career some 2 decades ago as an elementary school teacher at Bancroft Elementary. I worked at Stubbs. I was an assistant principal and principal at Bayard, when Bayard actually used to be a K-6 elementary school. It now serves as a 1st through 8th grade building in the Christina School District. Prior to that, it was a 6th through 8th grade building shortly thereafter my tenure at Bayard. My wife is also an educator. She is a world language teacher at Hodgenville Tech. We have 3 children. Jordan, who was a graduate, the class of 2022 from Delaware Military Academy. We have a 17-year-old junior at the Conrad Schools of Science and an 8th grader at the Conrad Schools of Science. So that's just a bit about me in terms of my professional and personal background. I'm a graduate of the University of Delaware, where I received my bachelor's in elementary teaching education, my master's in educational leadership. I was a student athlete under the helm of a historical Hall of Fame coach, Coach Tubby Raymond. So I was a Blue Hen, and I received my doctorate from Wilmington University.
Awesome. Well, thank you. One other disclaimer, as Dr. Green and I get into the referendum, my goal is just to share the information about it. I hope to ask questions that make people think that I'm super supportive of it. And I hope I ask questions that make people think I am super critical of it and oppose it. I'm just trying to get out as much information as we can. So as I was talking to Dr. Green earlier, I mentioned how I was at a civic association meeting last week, and we're talking about the referendum. And there's plenty of knowledgeable and engaged people who don't even know what a referendum is. So, Dr. Green, could you talk about the process of how this referendum came to be and what a referendum is in general?
Yeah, so thank you again. I think the referendum is really the purest form of democracy when you actually think about it, in the sense that we as a organization have to go out to our constituents and members within our community to ask for their support. In this case, to raise or levy some local taxes, and our constituency have the ability and or right to exercise that vote, whether they're in support of or in support of against what we're asking. And so why do we need referenda? It really is to increase or to levy local operating funds based on the assessed value of properties within our district. And so this requires board approval, and it requires our community, again, to go out and support the acts that we are putting before the community in the form of a ballot. And so this year, the date is February 28th, where we'll be coming out to acts. This is really looking at the assessed value of our community, and referendum requires, again, the board approval and the community vote. The last time that Red Clay has gone out to a referendum was in 2015. So we're approaching almost a decade since the last referendum was passed, and that was the last time that the district had any significant cost increases to its local tax base throughout Red Clay.
Thank you.
Two other things, and I'll just go on to add, there are two aspects. You can go out for a capital referendum, or you can go out for an operating referendum. Operating referendum are for expenses, things such as curriculum, salaries, benefits, and those things. And then the capital referendum is for infrastructure, buildings, maintenance, and capital needs as it relates to facilities.
So the board voted to approve this where we are in the process already. Is that right?
Yeah, so the board has voted to approve, and now in essence, the next phase in terms for the board is to really approve the ballot itself in terms of what the Department of Elections will put on that ballot. The other aspect of this is the state, when you go out for capital needs, Red Clay, we have approximately 2,870,000 plus square feet of facility space. We have the oldest facilities within the state. AI Middle School will be celebrating, I believe it's its 131st anniversary coming up here in January. We have 29 schools that have varying capital needs. As a district, there are aspects where you have minor capital improvement funding that you can get from the state. In this essence, if it approaches a threshold, you have to go out for a referendum or capital needs. And so in this instance, we have close to about $500 million of deferred maintenance as a district across 29 schools. We went out 3 years ago to get a state approval because you need a state approval through a process called a certificate of necessity. So you have to demonstrate to the state that you have these varying needs through what is called a CN, or certificate of necessity. We attempted to go out 3 years ago. The state, in essence, denied it, and that goes through the bond committee where they issue bonds, 20-year bonds to do these capital improvements.
Why did they deny it?
Because there's limited state funding. We have several districts across the state, such as Appoquinimink, who unfortunately recently failed a referendum. You have Indian River, and Cape Henlopen are 3 districts that are experiencing growth. And so that the way the state had to prioritize those certificates of necessity or capital improvement acts was based on growth, kind of took the priority. So schools or school districts that needed new facilities kind of received the funding, and school districts that put forth, capital needs for existing facilities were in essence denied. And the challenge for us is if the state continues to deny, then that just increases our deferred maintenance, because there's only so much that you can do as it relates to capital improvements if you don't have the state portion, which is a 60-40 split around a capital improvement. So the state provides 60%, and then we have to go out again to our local community to get the basically the local match, which is the 40% of that share.
So the state needs to bless going for a capital referendum. Does
Correct.
the state need to bless going for an operating referendum?
No, they don't.
Okay.
Operating referendum is solely based on the need, again, for local expenses to meet the operating needs of the district. Everything, as I indicated, from curriculum, student needs, positions, salaries, and such.
Okay. And so delving more into the Red Clay specifics of the upcoming referendum, it looks like there's both here. There's an operating referendum and a capital referendum. And I'm going to pull up I found two good articles that I'm going to pull up. Let me see here. Does everybody see Chuck Berry right now? That was
Pulling something up.
Okay. So does everybody see my screen with the district improvements by system? So this is what I'm looking at right here from this Delaware Live article, Dr. Green. This is the all-in capital and operating referendum.
This is the all-in. Let me see, because I'm not sure we're all.
Sure, it's got a 289 million price tag.
Bits and pieces out of the actual presentation. What I can do, let me see if you would allow me to share my screen.
Sure. Let me see here. Here, I'm going to make you a co-host, and that should give you permission to share your screen.
So hopefully you see a presentation with a screen with 5 amazing scholars on it that has a date from November 6th.
Nothing yet.
Okay, hold on.
There we go. Something's coming up. Yes, now we do. Yeah,
okay.
if you could get to the nitty-gritty of the
I will. So again, just around, this was from a November 6th public meeting that we had around operating, around the referendum. And it can kind of get somewhat confusing again when you look at referendum, but if you looked at and we looked at consumer price index. I know we have conversations around inflation. Typically with a referendum, the year you pass a referendum, the following year when the taxes hit, you get a huge bump in local revenue, and then you start spending down that money to the point where through the referendum process, eventually you got to go back out to raise or increase or acquire more local revenue. And so this kind of looks just simply at consumer price index going against local revenue, the trend line in terms of where we had a bump and then you kind of flatline, or eventually you end up going to a point where you have deficit spending. And so for our 2015 referendum, we went 9 years. And if you look at the frequency in terms of many of our neighboring districts, they've gone out 2 to 3 times in the amount of time that it took Red Clay to go out for 1 year. We're looking to continue to have, no 100% locally funded positions. So we don't look to fund positions locally. There are federal positions that are funded, again, state supported positions that are funded. Some of the things that we're looking at from an operating standpoint is, implementing initiatives that we're committed to in the 2015 referendum, which is continued one-to-one technology for our students, curriculum adoptions, things, reading supports, safety and security, school intervention, and then after-school programming such as athletics and other enrichment opportunities. And then limited local salary increases, because we have negotiated agreements, that require those salary increases. We did have the ability through COVID to leverage the federal ESSER funds to do one-time improvements things such as HVAC, ventilation, which help offset some of the costs. Again, but with old facilities, you still have a lot of capital needs within our 29 buildings across the district. And then looking at while student growth is leveled off, student needs have somewhat increased across. So I want to get to the actual ask. So when we talk about an ask, we're looking at pretty much a 3-year phase-in. So this would be a 3-year referendum, again, maintain existing programs, continued selected ESSER programming such as building substitutes, curriculum materials, strategic plan support initiatives such as our career and technical ed pathways, safety and security, additional constables, and additional state required updates to facilities and things that the state is requiring us to do.
So this is the operating part of it.
Yeah, I'm going to get it's a combination of both. This is where if you looked at how do we compare in terms of current expense rate per $100 assessed value of homes. Our tax rate per se currently is the second lowest in comparison to Appoquinimink in the county across the 5 comprehensive school districts. Newcastle County VOTEC, in essence, does not have to go out to operating referendums. So as an example, they're building a brand new Hodson VOTEC that is a state-funded initiative that's actually more than what the state is granting us through our certificate of necessity for 29 buildings. So when you look at comparison-wise, we're asking, for capital funds to support 29 schools across Red Clay Consolidated School District, where the Newcastle County VOTEC is getting more funding to, in essence, to build one building. So this chart here shows what the, in terms of based on, and we took the average of assessed values and try to figure it out because again, we will have a calculator on the website for individuals within the community to be able to see what that exact cost will be based on their assessed value. So this isn't if you go on Zillow and look up right now what Zillow would have as your market value. It's in essence what the county would have as your assessed value. And again, to your point, Mr. Spadola, I was looking to kind of hold off because we're still waiting information around what that assessment or reassessment process will look like for Newcastle County. But if we took the average cost and we looked at the average, let's say the assessed value of the Newcastle County residential property being at about $80,755. For current operating expenses, we're looking at the average taxpayer paying about $1,200 a year with the increased acts of a 30-10-10. And that first year, the tax impact will be an additional annual change of $242, roughly $20 a month. And then you'll see that decrease over the 26, 27, and there will be no cost to the taxpayer in FY28. So
no new cost. No new cost.
No new cost, correct.
So all in for the this is just the operating. We're looking at 242 plus 80. So, and those are all cumulative increases. So it's 242 plus 80 plus 80, and that's the total increase into perpetuity, which that's about $400. I'm doing rough math. Am I right?
Correct.
Okay. And that's not counting.
And that's over a 3-year period.
Okay.
And that's not counting capital. And then capital is just a little different because you are looking at, again, the scope and parameters of the assessment, 29 buildings, 2.8 million plus square feet. We had to do an on-site assessment. And so during that on-site assessment, we identified a 5-year forecast of deferred maintenance and capital improvement needs. And then they had to evaluate the remaining useful line of major building systems, asset in terms of project standards and development. Those are things such as ADA compliance types of things that come up that, again, may require capital improvements. And these are district-wide initiatives. And then we had to look at cost estimating for that capital aspect of it. So findings through the 5-year forecast, the analysis that we had done, we had approximately $508.4 million in improvements identified within a 1 to 5-year scope. And again, this was 3 years ago when we submitted the original certificate of necessity. 200 million of that, 49% of the improvements were needed within the 1 to 2 year scope. So again, we're going back 3 years ago, 49% of those improvements, we're talking about major systems such as HVACs, systems, roofs, ADA secure entrances, space use, electrical systems, and then 71% of the total need is for deferred maintenance. And so again, because the state, in essence, has to approve the capital aspect of it, you have to continue to defer maintenance. So we had to put certain schools on cycles to determine who gets boilers, who gets chillers, who gets the new roof, who gets site work, and such over that period of time. And so in essence, those 1 to 2 year projects are now 3 years old, as it relates to that initial assessment in terms of why we have this need to go out for a referendum. Again, the forecast and the type of projects really looked, the bulk of it was HVAC, electrical, and plumbing. You have interior. The next largest portion was around accessibility, health, and wellness, and then exterior and enclosure types of issues. When you break it down from a pie chart standpoint, just in terms of how that 1 to 2 year plan in terms of the overall acts. Mind you, 3 years ago, our certificate of necessity act was 200 million to the state. The year after the denial, because of escalation costs around materials, pricing, and supplies, we didn't change it. It went up to 260 million. And this year, again, thankfully, we were able to, through ESSER funding, pull some projects off because we did some HVAC and ventilation with that. Even with escalation, it was a $280 million ask to the Department of Ed for those costs.
So of that, if you could go back to that, this is just bricks and mortar.
Bricks, mortar, facilities, again, major systems to keep the buildings safe.
What about that 21st century? Is that programming?
Yes. I mean, there are things, obviously with technology, but the 21st century is programming. So when you look at the cost as it relates to impact to owners here, and again, you got to know that these bonds are issued over a 20-year period because that's how the state issues capital funding. It's over a 20-year bond. So actually for FY29, you're going to see money actually come off a decrease because existing funding is in essence coming off the books from previous years, and then going out to 26, FY26, 27, and 28, you see the $3.60 monthly, or the $44 annually, the 30, and then the 37.
So if I'm adding up these annual changes, I'm looking at about $90 total on top.
Yes, over a 3 year period, issued over 20-year bonds. So it gets a little confusing just in terms of how that works. Yeah.
Okay. Now, do these so the overall $90 increase, do those roll off because it's capital, or are those into perpetuity?
No, again, so that's why you see the negative 87 cents. They come off eventually. Yeah. So they will. Those are not in perpetuity.
So what I'm trying to get at is, for the residents, the long-term tax increase is really about the operating referendum, which is $400 a year. The capital increase is temporary after these 3 years. Is that correct?
It's temporary in terms of, yes, how the state issues the bond, and when debt starts to come off, then taxes will. So it's not in they don't operate in the same lane as you indicated in terms of operating and capital. Yes, because that debt, you pay down that debt over time, again, and those debts come off the books.
Gotcha. So just to clarify, even though this just has the 4 fiscal years, the bonds are live for 20 years.
Correct.
So those increases are live for 20 years. They just don't increase after the 3 years, right?
Right.
So we're looking at basically all in $500 increase over 20 years, and then the capital bonds should be paid off, and those will come off, and it'll go back down to 400 ideally. And obviously, that's
and as those projects, yes, get paid off, you will see again difference in terms of a decrease between your capital and your operating.
okay. Good, because
It's a confusing process, and again, I'm sure there'll be plenty of more questions that come out as a result of it. But I think the reality of it is, just as a district, we don't go out unless we need it. This isn't to build Taj Mahals. Again, these are major life systems that our buildings require. Many of the buildings in Red Clay are, in essence, what we call two-pipe systems. So you can't run heat and air conditioning at the same time. So many of our buildings right now, they're running on heat. And then we have to cycle at a certain point where then if it's a cold day and then you cycle to air conditioning, you can't switch it back and forth like our residential or many of the newer schools who have four pipe systems, who have the ability to do so. So again, having the largest facility or footprint across the state in terms of number of buildings and facilities. I would even say from an operating standpoint, really looking at the diverse programs that we offer as a district, whether that would be the various magnet programs that we offer, Conrad Schools of Science, Cab Calloway School of the Arts. We also serve as the only authorizer as a district of two charter schools. The rest of the charter schools are authorized by the state. We're the authorizer for the Charter School of Wilmington. We're also serve as the authorizer for the Delaware Military Academy. And again, a lot of different specialized programs. 3 out of our 5 high schools per se, or secondary schools, are 6th through 12th grade kind of magnet focus schools. And so again, this is a need that will continue to go out to help the community to see why we're asking for this ask and why deferred maintenance has been deferred for so long, not just because of the state, but because the district typically hasn't gone out until there's actually a need. And some say that that's not the best strategy, because you want your taxpayers to understand that this is a 3 to 5 or 3 to 4 year kind of cyclical process. But again, I've been here 5 years, and even when I came in, it was, we're going to have to go out to referendum soon. And it was really, how can we manage more with less and actually go out to the taxpayer when we actually have that need.
I think we're good with the numbers. Would you mind taking that off the screen?
Yes, sir.
Awesome.
And I'll just leave this, just some key audiences in tailoring the message. We will, again, have opportunities to come out to smaller groups once we get into the new year, to be able to engage the community to help folks better understand what the actual ask and request is as it relates to this upcoming referendum. And hopefully I'm stopped sharing and we're all full screen.
Yes, we are good. So I got an email, and this comes back to, I want to ask questions that maybe seem super supportive and super critical. So on the critical side, I did get an email that's saying, Red Clay was 42%, Red Clay students were 42% proficient in English, 32% proficient in math. I got a comment from John here that says, why should taxpayers support the current approach to education in Wilmington when the outcomes are so poor? And you know that comes up, Dr. Green. What do you say to the person who says, look, at these schools are failing, yes, these are bricks and mortar that we need money for, but why are we putting good money after bad? What do you say to that person?
Well, I say we're putting good money after children, and of no fault of their own, regardless of what we look and say about the system. We have to support children. We have to support the educators who are working to support children. And yes, are there areas where we need to strengthen the system? Of course we do. This isn't just a Red Clay issue. It's just not a state of Delaware issue. I think if we look at, it's a national issue. And we have to be conscious of, not only are we just looking at proficiency, we're also looking at growth. Not all of our children across the district start at the same level or have that leveled playing field. And so ultimately, it's how do we use these resources that we're garnering from our community to be able to equitably distribute those funds to be able to meet that need. We have a changing demographic. We have a lot of multilingual learners. We have students who don't come from homes or communities where they have that foundational support. We're also looking, and since I've been here, we've expanded our preschool and pre-K early learning opportunities, which ultimately is the best intervention. But we also don't get capital funding or support from the state for early learning space either, which is another issue for a different day. But yeah, we're well aware that people are going to be critical of the system, and we'll throw proficiency scores up there as the only barometer of school success. But we know as a public school system, we have to take and receive children and families however they come, and we're responsible for providing them with the necessary supports to not only demonstrate or work toward proficiency, but help them grow from where they come to us to where they end up year over year.
And even though most of this referendum is for capital needs, how can you tie the referendum approval directly to student outcomes improving?
I think there are a lot of inputs that come into our system, whether that's state funding, federal funding, local funding, and this is the local match to the state funding that we receive. And so there is a local share or burden, if you want to put it in that term, to the local taxpayer. And they could choose whether or not, again, the state is willing to pony up their share. And this is an opportunity for us to garner that local match. And so I think just being strategic around looking at whether that would be class sizes, because if you don't have local funds and you don't have necessary supports, you likely would see an increase in class sizes. But there are a lot of inputs to say that you're going to draw a direct line or correlation between a successful referendum. You do need resources, and resources in terms of funding. Most funding and most districts' operating budget are people. And so if you don't have the people to do the work, if you don't have the resources to support the people who are doing the work, then you run into those challenges where we'll look at a metric and a single metric, which is also a lagging indicator to say that we're throwing, to your point, what you said is good money after bad, which I don't see that being the case.
I was quoting the question.
No, I know. I know that you were saying that, but we have to figure out what that investment is, and it's why we're coming out to the community right now, because we need that support for our children, regardless of where they come from.
With city schools specifically, we saw that the Spanish immersion program at Marbrook looks to be closing down.
And it's not. So for the record, we want, and this is a resource allocation, so please share the message. We are not closing the program. We'd initially discussed the phase out for the Marbrook program, one, to promote Lewis, which is our full dual language immersion school, because it is a resource allocation issue. There are inequities when we look at Marbrook, for example, that has 120 multilingual learners with 2 dedicated staff supporting them, and 182 students within the immersion program K-5 that has 12 educators. And then when we look at classes at the 5th grade level, there are sections of 12 and 13 for immersion classrooms, and the non-immersion classrooms are above 20. So you're indicating or providing resources to students in the immersion program, which in essence, the state does not provide us with additional units for immersion. Those are resources that come from the school as a whole. And so you have to make those tough decisions. But what we have agreed to with Marbrook community, because it is a vital part of the school community, is to have a work group to really look at resource equity, to look at sustainability, because the other thing that they're experiencing is attrition. The current cohort model, they request or ask that you have 25 students per se in a cohort. So in essence, 50 at a grade level. By time the current cohort starts in kindergarten, you're seeing anywhere between 19, 20 students drop off a cohort. So right now, the current 5th grade cohort, there are 25 students total in the immersion program, with 2 dedicated homeroom teachers, Spanish teachers who are doing that. And so part of that issue will be with this work group is to look at why wouldn't we collapse that 5th grade classroom to save a resource for those students who are in a non-immersion classroom. So we continue to work with them through that process to really look at resource allocation.
Well, that's good, because I know some parents of the Spanish immersion program at Lewis Elementary were concerned about an influx of students from Marbrook without additional resources, but you're saying they don't need to be concerned about that.
Well, no, they don't, because technically we're 16 units that we've dedicated district-wide to the immersion program. And again, those are units that we, in essence, don't earn through the state, but those are resources that the schools earn, and we're providing those supports to have innovative programs such as immersion.
Okay. So we have board member Martin Wilson Sr. on here, and I saw Kathy Thompson as well. I know she might be dealing with some grandkids, so not able to speak, but I just wanted to invite them on for the last 10 minutes we have. And Mr. Wilson, if you want to go first, if you wanted to share your thoughts on the Red Clay referendum and where we are. I appreciate your outlook on a lot of things, so curious what you have to say.
Yes, I would just echo the message which Dr. Green has spoke about. I think he gave a great synopsis of the referendum, both of them. And my plea is to our community all over to help come out in February and vote, help support us. We need this. The buildings are in need. We know our teachers need salary increases. Right now, we're teetering right there close to the bottom. I think Red Clay is a great district and we have great teachers, but we lose teachers because of the funding, money. And everybody is about the almighty dollar, you know. We all have interests, we all plead the same thing, it's about the children. But when it comes down to it, I have different teachers, even in my neighborhood, that, you know, they speak out for the dollar. They speak out for the kids. They want to be compensated. And let me tell you, if you have employees that are happy, it makes the job a lot easier. We all can come on board. And we know that, you know, when we talk about increases with taxes, the elderly will have a big complaint. I don't have children no more. It's about great grands and grandchildren. But, you know, we need everyone. We need all the help because, as Dr. Green says, it's about all the children. I don't care which side of town you live on. I don't care whether you're in District A, District C, whatever district area, that it's for the children. And it's from pre-K till 12th grade. And that's the thing. We're behind the ball. We know what the pandemic has done for Red Clay overall, the whole United States of America. But we are interested in really what is happening in Red Clay. We want to bring the children up. We want our buildings to be the best buildings, that not only the children are comfortable, but adults are comfortable, that their kids are in great buildings that are up to code, and that, you know, we just have a big future in front of us. But we need this referendum to pass. So as Dr. Green says, we will be having plenty more meetings, smaller meetings for the public, that they can ask any question. If they get questions and they need to funnel them to the district office, funnel them to this district office, so that we as a district, as a board, as a superintendent, that we can get answers in a timely fashion, that everyone will be comfortable with pursuing our referendum. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. And hello, Kathy Thompson, former Red Clay School Board President, and maybe the longest serving school board member. Is that right?
Martin is longer than me. I'm in 13 years. I think he's in 23 or something.
Oh, excuse me. I'm way off, but glad to have you with us. Yeah, can you share your piece on it? And before that, was the board vote on this unanimous? Is every school board member in favor of the referendum?
Yes, it was unanimous.
Okay.
Because everybody knows. And so I've been sitting on the CFRC, for the Community Financial Review Committee, and looking at our finances for a very long time, probably since close to when I came on the board. And I want to say that Red Clay does a phenomenal job in terms of managing the finances that it has. As you all know, education funding in the state of Delaware is complex. And but we've done a great job, as Dr. Green has stated. We haven't gone out for an operating referendum since 2015. Can you imagine if you had not gotten a raise since 2015, what your spending power would be like? And for the buildings, we have 29 buildings, as Dr. Green said. We haven't been able to go out for a capital referendum since 2012. So can you imagine not maintaining your house for 11 years and what that cost would be? Red Clay has done a phenomenal job managing its operating expenses and managing its capital expenses. Because if you go in our buildings look clean and neat. I mean, it's impressive when you go in there. So I think Dr. Green was being a tad modest. I think we have very carefully managed the funds that we have. And as Dr. Green said, you get this spike when you pass a referendum and then we spend it down. We've been very careful with all of the monies that we've received. I hope the community sees that. I do think Dr. Green I can't say enough about him as a superintendent. I think we have a phenomenal superintendent. And my hope is that the community will allow him and our board to put in place innovative programs that allow all of our children to succeed. And as he mentioned, our population of students is becoming more and more complex as we go along, and we've got to address all of the students. And it's very challenging at times for not only the administration, but also for our educators, all of those in the building. And we need to support everybody. But we've done a great job. I hope everybody sees it. We have a great leader in Dr. Green. And my hope is we will continue to go forward as Red Clay and just kill it. We are known probably as the best district in the state, and I think we want to keep that reputation.
Thank you,
So
Kat.
thank you, James, for hosting us.
Sure. So we have 2 minutes left. My last question for you, Dr. Green. We saw the APO referendum just fail. What is Plan B for Red Clay? I know you can come back a second time. What would Red Clay cut off the second referendum if the first one were to fail? Just talk to me about what's next if this one didn't pass.
So we're looking at, I think with anything, you're looking at major cuts. Right. I think you're looking at cuts in programs, first and foremost, things that benefit children, those extracurricular, co-curricular programs. You're going to probably look at a reduction in staffing across the board. So we've already begun that process of having our departments look at what those level of cuts be. And you don't want to approach this as scare tactic, because I know, having been in part of several other referendums in my previous districts and work experience. But the reality is, again, when you're looking at, we are the people business, so teaching and learning is the relationship between a student and an adult. And so in order to have a strong, robust education system, you have to invest in the people that help drive that system, and you need facilities that are adequate in this day and age to allow that learning to happen. And so, yeah, there will be cuts, and we can communicate what that cut will look like, whether that's a $5 million reduction. I know that we talked about up to potentially $10 million reduction in local funds. That would be a major hit to us just to maintain. And I think that's the other thing that people have to understand. This isn't us going out to say that we want bells and whistles. This is for us to enhance and really look at current operating expenses. And we're not coming out frivolously asking taxpayers to give up their hard-earned money to the district just for us to go on lavish spending. This is really for us to truly invest in, I think, some things that we've put in place, whether it be science or reading, to really look to that point when we talk about proficiency rates, to really elevate and level the playing field, not only for our students, but our staff members, and then ultimately for our property owners and taxpayers in the district, so that when someone is looking to move into an area within Newcastle County, Red Clay is the district that they're choosing. Well, folks want to work in a place that they feel respected and well compensated. Red Clay is the place that they want to work. And if you have a child, grandchild, relative, where you look at identifying a school where you want them to learn, Red Clay is the place that you're choosing. And again, that takes resources. So if you live in Red Clay, if you have a relative, child member, neighbor who's learning in a Red Clay school, if you have a relative, employee, or you desire to work in a top-notch school district, Red Clay is the place you want to work. So it's live, learn, work Red Clay. That's our tagline for this referendum, because it's just not just about schools, it's about community. You know, you don't want that 13-year-old, 12-year-old with nothing to do after school. As my grandmother would say, idle's mind is a devil's workshop. We would rather keep them for as long as we can keep them, provide them with quality programs and supports, and that's an investment that we are asking our taxpayers to make.
Well, thank you, Dr. Green. Thank you to the school board members that joined us as well, and appreciate everybody coming in. And yeah, I'm going to post this on Facebook, and everybody have a good night.
You as well.
Very much. Good night, everyone.
Good night.